There are a few things in this world that are sacred to me. My friends, my car, and my women.
So I think this interview needs to start by sort of explaining the setting here.
So yeah, this room, we put this room together to kind of, like, we have a kind of seedy underbelly of Paris in our game, and this is kind of to help set that mood and want to get people in a demo and talk about the game. So it's really comfortable and quiet, which is nice too, so we can not yelling on the floor at each other. So yeah, it's really cool. It's great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the character and why he ends up in a place like this?
So Sean is a Irishman who's the race car driver that turns Saboteur, inspired actually by a real world person. He goes to Germany early in the game for a race just before the war, and what happens is after the race something goes horribly wrong, and somebody close to him is killed by a rival racer who's also a Nazi. And so basically that kicks Sean off on a vengeance quest, and how he gets here is he goes to when he flees into Paris, his friends kind of hide him out in what we call the WWII, which is a cabaret brothel right across from the Moulin Rouge in our world. And so it's this kind of seedy underbelly club, and it's a really interesting location where a lot of the story really kicks off in Paris.
Can you tell us a little bit what Paris is like at the time when Sean gets there?
So when Sean gets there, the occupation, he's there just before the occupation, and you'll see in a scene where we'll actually see the occupation kind of rolling in, and he's hiding out there, but basically kind of by the time the player really gets to go out into the world, it's fully occupied. And the black and white look of our game, what we use to symbolize the occupation, is just everywhere in Paris, and you basically end up spending a lot of the game kind of fighting back against that.
It's not a game that's easily explained because it doesn't really look like anything we've seen before. It's not, your typical World War II game. Yeah, it lends a few elements from Mercenaries and games that Pandemic have done before. How would you describe the game?
I mean, at its core, the simplest term is it's a big blockbuster action sandbox game. Like, that's kind of what we do, and it's kind of Pandemic's brand in a way too. Like, we like to make big action games, but yeah, I mean, it is kind of hard to describe, and like, we don't even call it a World War II game in a lot of ways. It's like we have Nazis; they're great bad guys, and to us, it's like Indiana Jones is in a World War II movie, but has Nazi bad guys, and so the war is a backdrop, and that's why we have the vengeance story, and we do like the color palette stuff that we do. We took a lot of liberties. We're more inspired by the history. We have Zeppelins in our game, which were decommissioned, but they're awesome, and we want to blow them up, and it'd be really fun. So, it's just a big action game, but with a lot of cinematic movie kind of elements all tying it together.
How much freedom have you taken with the World War II theme? It's a bit of a sensitive thing, I guess, to play around with it.
It's just we wanted to really, we kind of play up the resistance in the game. We really wanted to kind of glorify that in a way. But everybody's kind of there's a seedy side to it, because normally it's the soldier story, in the game, in the World War II games, and so again, we just didn't want to do any of that, and so everybody's got their own personal motivations in there. It's very character or story driven, and we have this really just dark, seedy world, and we try to pay respect to things. We're trying not to be hurt anybody's feelings with anything, but we're just going really big and doing things that we have giant cannons installed on buildings that didn't really happen, but it'd be cool to blow them up and to have fun in the game and really use our sandbox.
You mentioned briefly the color palette and what you're doing with that. Can you explain a bit in detail what the thoughts are behind that?
So the idea of the black and white comes from the fact we're okay, we're going to build Paris. We knew we were building Paris because we were inspired by this character that actually existed in Paris, and the Paris occupation was such an interesting time in this beautiful city to explore anyhow. So the idea was you have Paris, and it's colorful and it's beautiful, and if you put Nazis in there, it just doesn't feel occupied, So we had to really kind of amplify that, and so the idea was to suck the life out of the world, is what we like to call it, and so that's where we came up with the whole black and white concept, and then kind of inspired by Sin City, definitely, to put the colors in there popping out to give the player something to look at, and we really spent a lot of time trying to get our black and white to look great. But then what's cool is that you can actually fight back against that. And so when you do these missions, and we call Grand Acts of Defiance, you'll complete some big objective, and you'll blow up a big cannon, or you'll take down a train, and the color will bleed back out into the world. And what that does is inspire the people. So when you're in those colorful areas, what we call the high will to fight, the resistance will join in, and so people kind of take arms and start fighting alongside you back against the Nazis.
I've heard about Saboteur for quite a while. You announced it quite early.
Yeah.
Has it been a struggle, the development, or why is it taking so long to get to a point where you actually showed off full-fledged?
So we really put a lot of work into maturing our technology and fleshing out the missions in the game and just building it and refining it. And so it's just we're just, it's kind of just our time to come out of the dark and really like show the game. And we built our own technology for this. It's not the Mercenaries engine. We started sharing technology with them, but we realized immediately we were going to make a much more intimate kind of game, and we wanted that kind of graphic fidelity down in the world that you'd see in like a level-based type game. And then, but when you can get on the rooftops, you can see across this huge draw distance across the world. And so we knew we had to just, a lot of it's just really maturing that tech to really support the gameplay and our character and our story to flesh the whole game out.
And when will we get to play it?
You will get to play it this holiday, so that, yeah, before the end of the year.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.